Alright, welcome everybody back to my workbench here today. This is Jeremy, aka Mitsurugi-w on the forums. I'm going to make this video to show you how I change a CPS3 battery. And basically this is my setup. I've got my trusty old super gun. This is actually a mass, like one of those old mass system super guns from way back in the day. Still works like a charm. I use this to power the PCB while I'm changing the battery. I have a monitor here that I basically salvaged from an old card DVD system. If you can see here, it's got these connections for the power. I just had to find a power adapter, and then I've got my audio and a video connection that connects to the super gun. And so when I have the PCB powered up, I can see the game working. If the game stops working while I'm doing it, that means I either killed it or I just need to hurry up and finish and hope it's still alive. And that right there helps me figure that out. I have this, my Hako 808, my desoldering gun. This thing is awesome. Make sure any desoldering gun you have is grounded. I recommend this because it's super quick. It's lightweight, it works great. Got my solder, of course. I got my soldering station. I have it set at 375 degrees Celsius, which is around 700 some Fahrenheit. No math major. And then I'm just going to use my soldering iron, which is kind of a big tip for all this solder that we're going to do. It's a big joint on the battery, so it's good. And then down here, I'm going to have this hooked up on my super gun. It's I just happen to have a new generation and a Jojo's Venture working PCB fully loaded, and I'm going to use those with these cartridges I'm going to change. These two cartridges I have is a new generation and a Jojo. Those are the batteries I'm going to change today. So I'll actually hook up this PCB up here, and it's going to be, the game is going to be running, so I use the power on method while I'm changing the battery, so I can see that the game is still alive while I'm changing it. Now this right here is something I designed. It's like an old CPS3 cartridge that's been cut down with a Dremel, so I have easy access to actually change the battery. But what this does is it keeps the cartridge, the security cartridge, nice and steady in the slot, so it's not wiggling back and forth, because if it wiggles too far one way and it loses connection, you've just killed your cartridge. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Come back, I'm going to show you that. Okay, now before you go about changing your CPS3 battery, there's a few things you want to do. What this right here is, this is a 3.6 volt lithium battery. It's a 1/2 AA size with axial leads, so you can solder it. What you want to do is you always, even if you buy this battery brand new, you really have no idea how old the battery is unless there's a date code printed on it. This one happens to be October, I don't know if you see it there, October of 2012, which is fine. Obviously, the closer to today's date, the better. But these batteries, if they're not installed, can last several years. And once they're installed, I mean, there's some of these batteries that are in these Capcom boards are, shoot, 15, 16, almost 17 years old now, if not more, and still working. So you at least get 5 to 7 years out of this battery when you change it. Probably more. I always change my batteries every 5 years because I don't want them to die. So it's that. So what you want to do is you want to test the voltage on your battery. Make sure it's proper. Like I said, this is 3.6 volt. The CPS3 security cartridges came with a 3 volt lithium battery, and it's perfectly fine to replace those with a 3.6 volt. It works just fine. Nothing will happen. Nothing bad will happen. So if you're one of those people that collect CPS2 and CPS3 and you want to change your batteries, just go with the 3.6 volt. Save yourself the inventory. Just buy the one type of battery. It's all you need. Now this is how you check it. If you have a 3 volt battery, it's going to read about 3.2 volts when you check it. This 3.6 volts battery should read right around 3.6 volts. So I've got it set to the DC setting in the 20 volt range. I'm just going to hit both leads here. So you see 3.65 volts. 3.6, 3.7, 3.65. You know. So that's perfect. We know this battery is good, so we can proceed to use it. Now, there's been plenty of times where I've heard where people have ordered battery kits off eBay or whatever, and they went ahead and replaced their battery and ended up with a dead board. And when they go and check their battery voltage, it's 0 volts. Like I said, you never know how old the inventory is unless there's a date code on it. So check your date code. If it's more than a couple years old, I just wouldn't use it. I would try to find a fresher date code. Spend a little bit more money and just get them from Mauser or DigiKey or someplace like that. Alright, so that's that. Next thing I'm going to show you is I'm going to clean the cartridge contacts. I'll be right back to show you that. Alright, since I'm doing a power on method for this battery swap, I want to make sure I got things as ready to go as possible so I can change this thing as quickly as possible while being able to concentrate and all that. Because I don't want to rush it and ruin it. But one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get these battery leads prepared to be inserted into the cartridge after the old battery is removed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a dead cartridge that I have already, and I'm going to go ahead and bend these leads, and I'm going to go ahead and put them through the holes. That way the battery is already formed to around about where it needs to be. And I don't need all this extra lead, so I'm actually going to trim it down just a tiny bit because they're going to get in the way when I'm trying to solder it down. So I'm just going to cut about, I don't know, maybe an inch off of each side. And as you can see, I still have a ton of lead to solder there, but there's less in the way when I got to solder the battery. And then I'll just take the battery out, keep it like that, and I'm going to set it off to the side. So when I come back to actually change the battery, it's already formed. All I got to do is remove the other battery as best I can and carefully just insert this right back in. It's already close to where it needs to be. Alright, next section coming up. Okay, now what we have here are the two candidates that I'm going to use for this battery swap video. One of these is a new generation, and one of these is a Jojo's Venture, the first one. I'm not sure which one is which. I don't have them labeled. I'll check them before I change the battery. As you see, one's a C and the other one's a D. So both of these you can just hook them up and then swap the battery, no problem. Now, occasionally you'll get one of the older ones. It's a A or B cartridge, which this was an A cartridge before I converted to Super BIOS. But on the back of the A and B cartridge, you have these wires, and you're going to have to add an extra wire in order to not kill the cartridge. And when we come back, I'm going to show you how to do that. We'll be right back. Alright, so here we have the back side of an A or B cartridge. You have all these wires here that aren't on the C and D cartridges, and the most important wire we're looking at is this black wire right here. It's attached to this little PCB over here. Now, normally this is soldered to the battery terminal right here, and if you remove this black wire, then you kill the cart. So the chances are when you remove the battery, if you don't do a modification, the wire's gonna come loose and you're gonna kill the cart. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take and run a separate second jumper wire that acts as this black wire, and we'll actually have two wires set when we're done. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna run, I'll show you here, as you can see, that black wire is soldered right there. And if you can see, I don't know if you can tell, but this is in circuit here, meaning that this point right here and that point are in circuit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a second jumper wire and we're going to solder it right on this side of this component, and then we're going to run it all the way over here, and we're going to solder it to this very last pin on the back side of this chip. And just to show you my point here that they are in circuit, I've got my multimeter here set to continuity. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take right there, touch right there, and then I'm going to touch there. See, that's in circuit. Now I'm going to touch this last pin. So we're in circuit. You can hear it. Alright, now let me show you what happens if I remove that black wire. Use my desoldering gun here. Alright. I remove the black wire. Now watch continuity. Continuity between this little PCB here and this last pin is now gone. So we've just killed the cart if we had a battery on this cart still. Luckily this cart was already dead. So this one's going to be a candidate for the Super BIOS conversion. And by the way, if you do a Super BIOS conversion, make sure you always solder this black wire back to that terminal even if the battery's missing. Otherwise, then the cartridge won't work if you do that. So I'm going to cut it off for a second. I'm going to do the jumper modification. I'm going to come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, so here I am, I'm back. And as you can see, I've got another wire here added. It's jumpered to a spot, like I said I would. Just right there. I have it all the way coming here to the final pin on that chip. And what I use is insulated wire wrap. And that's what I use for that jumper. What I use for all my jumpers when I do PCB work. And as you can see, this black wire is completely disconnected right now. However, if I take my meter and continuity and I put it right where the black wire is actually soldered, right on that chip, right on that little sub PCB, and even though the black wire is disconnected, I have this jumper wire over here. I still have continuity on that battery terminal, so you're not going to kill the cart. Now, when you're finished changing this battery, you can leave this jumper wire, and we can additionally go ahead and solder this back onto the terminal. It's probably not necessary to do that. In fact, I know it's not necessary to do that, but I just like doing it just because of the way it is. So I'll solder the battery in, and I'll go back and I'll make sure that's connected in there too. So you'll have the black wire connected, and you'll still have this blue jumper wire. Like I said, you could remove the black wire if you really wanted to. I don't like doing that. Alright, so then once you had that jumper wire, you would just change the battery like you would the C and D cards exactly the same way. And I'll show you that in a minute. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean these cart contacts. Now, this is a cartridge I received. It's already dead. And I have not cleaned the cart contacts on this yet. I know a lot of people realize they'll have a dead cartridge and they'll be like, well, I just changed the battery, why the hell did my cartridge die? You know, my battery's only a year old, a couple months old or whatever. I've found that the biggest reason why cartridges die is because of dirty contacts or a dirty cartridge slot. If this is powered on and it loses its continuity with any of these certain pins lose their continuity while it's powered on, you're going to have a dead BIOS. It's going to just wipe it. It's going to kill your cart. It's the same thing as if you just had your cartridge plugged into the motherboard, you had it powered on, then you yanked the cartridge out while it was powered on. It's going to kill it. It will do it, I guarantee you. Don't try it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean these contacts before I put it in my motherboard to change the battery, because I use the power on method. So I want these to be as clean as possible, making as good a contact as possible with the cartridge slot, so there's no chance that it loses connection, or less of a chance that it loses connection while I'm changing the battery. And what I use is I just use this a little bit of Brasso, and what you can see here is I have a fairly clean rag, fairly clean towel. I'm going to show you how dirty these cart contacts are after just a few years of being installed on a PCB. So I literally just take a little dab right here on my finger, and I'm just going to put it on both sides, a little bit on both sides, and I'm just going to rub it in. Just going to rub it in here. Go back on this side. Rub it in real good. You can actually see the dirt coming off your contacts. And you can see on my finger there, see that dirt? Well, now let me take this towel. I'm going to buff this off. You might see the contacts get a little shinier. See that? Right there? That's off one side. And let me do the second side. See that? Look at that. That's just off the cartridge. That's causing your carts to die right there. That's why all these third strike carts are dying when the batteries are still fresh. I don't know how many cartridges I get in to convert to Super BIOS, and I always check the voltage on them, and they're always not dead. They're always still good. This is why, right here. Make sure you clean these cart contacts. And I don't know if you can really see, but yeah, look at that. Look at that, bitches. Yeah, that's gonna make good contact. It's too bad this cartridge is already dead. But I would do that for a live cartridge too. This is just for demonstration. Alright. Alright, come back for the next section in a minute. One more thing I want to show you real quick before I put this in my cartridge holder and boot it up. I took a piece of electrical tape and I covered this chip right here, the back leads of this chip, and what that's going to do is that's going to act as an insulator. It's very hard to desolder the battery while it's installed, and from experience I actually had my desoldering gun slip off of the lead for the battery and touch one of the leads on this chip and kill my cartridge. So now I use this piece of electrical tape and I cover down here, so if it does slip off, it's not going to hit anything that it can short out, or it's less likely to hit something that can short out. Alright, be back in a second. Alright, in this portion I'm going to demonstrate why I use this cartridge holder that I developed, the cartridge PCB holder. What I got here is I have a Super BIOS cart. It can't die, but what I can do is use this to show you what happens when the cartridge is just in the slot loosely and you bend it too far one way. So, turn this on. I plug this cartridge in. As you can see, my monitor over there booting up. Alright, I'm going to let it go ahead and get booted up and start running so you can see. Alright, so you see it's running. If this cartridge bends too far one way, I barely touched it and it froze. Now if that's a battery powered cart, you probably just killed it. So that's why I use this cartridge holder. Now let me do another demonstration. Let me put this, let me cut this off. I'm going to show you what it does when I have this cartridge this installed in this holder I have here. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to set it in here. See if we can show it. Set it in there. Back side goes on. So I'm trying to do this so I can watch the camera at the same time. Get in there, you bitch. Okay. Alright, it's in there. I'm going to go ahead and screw these two screws in. I just used a regular special, none of the special security screws, I just have regular Phillips heads so it's easier to screw in and out. Alright. Now I have my little cartridge adapter here, and as you can see, this right here is where the battery normally is. So I would have this in the PCB. I could desolder from this side because all the solder end is on this side. I desolder these here, pull the battery out this side, put the other one back in, and solder back on the other side, which is a little tricky, but if you take your time you can do it. But here, let me put this up here. boot it up. And as you can see, there's hardly any wiggle. Like, this holds the cartridge much smoother. Let it boot up. It's working once again. Look, I'm pushing on the cartridge. I'm moving the whole PCB. That's why I developed this, my friends. A little bit of wiggle is not going to kill my cartridge. So, pretty good invention if I do say so myself. Alright, and like I said, all I did was I used a Dremel cutting tool and I just cut all around except for where the little connectors are to hold the PCB in there, and it works like a charm. Alright, come back for the next section in a minute. Okay, briefly I wanted to go over this. With these battery changes I'm showing you, I'm just happen to be using a working original motherboard for each game that I'm changing. You don't necessarily have to do that. Let's just say, for example, I'm trying to change a Third Strike cart's battery and all I have is a Jojo or a new generation. You'll plug in the cart and you'll boot it up. It's going to give you an error message. So it'll give you something. Like this just happens to say, you know, is a new game inserted, do you want to rewrite? So you'll get some kind of error message. It'll say not enough memory or something on the screen, and I think most of them will have this little guy here dancing around. You know, as long as you have something like that, or you have something on screen, it's a good chance your cart is working fine. And as long as if you have this guy here and he's moving, you know the cart is still working fine. So if you're soldering and he stops moving, then you might have a problem. But like I said, you don't have to have a working motherboard for the game. You just have to have the cart powered up in some fashion. So as long as you got something on screen there, I'd say go ahead and change the battery. All right, I'm going to set this up for the Jojo, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here you see I have the security cart with the battery installed in the little case here. That's going to help me change it. And you can see the electrical tape right there covering that area that I don't want to short out. So let me go ahead and put this in and boot it up so you can see it working. And then I will readjust the camera. Let's see it booting up here in a second. SFIII. Alright, so it's running. I'm going to leave it running. I'm going to set the camera up where you guys can see better, and I'll be right back. Okay, so as you can hear, the game is still running, and hopefully I have it low enough where you can hear me talking over top of it. But now I'm going to do the hard part. I'm going to remove the battery. And when you remove this, like I said, I'm using my gun. Using my desoldering gun. You want to make sure you get all of the solder off of there so that the old battery isn't still stuck in there when you're done. And be very careful not to let it slip off these posts. Next up. Now here's the old battery right here. The posts on it are closer together than on the new battery, but on the cart you see you got the 3 holes there. There's 1 there and there's 2 over here. We're going to use the one farthest away. So I got my new battery ready. I'm going to carefully insert it into the holes. Make sure you put the positive in the positive and the negative in the negative. Alright, so it's in there. Now I gotta solder it in. I actually forgot to turn on my soldering iron first, so I'll come back in 1 second. Okay, now to solder the leads on this battery. I've got my soldering iron up to about 380 Celsius, so a little over 700 Fahrenheit. And I want to have it nice and hot because I want to get these joints done really quickly. I don't want to have my iron on it longer than needed. So as with any soldering, we're going to heat up the joint with the iron, and then we're going to add some solder to it. I've already tinned my tip, so let's try to do this as quickly as possible. And I get it to, I got to kind of wiggle it to get it to stick to the pad. There we go. That one looks pretty good. I'm going to come over here and do this one. A little bit more to that one. New generation. All right. You should be able to like wiggle your battery a little bit, and it's nice and tight. There's some pretty good looking joints. So what I'm going to do, in a second is I'm going to cut these extra leads off. So I'm going to go ahead and power down the board. It should be good and tight in there right now. I'm going to power down the board so when I cut these leads off, they don't fly or drop and hit something and short out. And then I'm going to turn it back on and make sure it's working again. Alright, so I've cut the extra leads off. Let me boot it back up. I boot it up and I'm looking at the monitor. You can't see it. I don't have the SFIII screen, so I know it's still working. Alright, so it's booting up. You're going to hear it in a second. Alright. So these joints look pretty good on this. If for some reason your joints don't look real good, you can carefully add a little bit of flux. And then just take your soldering iron and melt that joint real good. And that's going to be a good looking joint right there. I'm going to do that one there too. Boom. Just like that, my friends. Also make sure when you look, I'll show you over here. See how close that battery is to the so let me get some more light, maybe, no. How close the battery is to the PCB. You want as close as you can, right there. You don't want a lot of space so that when you put it back in the cart, it's going to fit. If you have it like high watered a little bit, it's not going to fit in the cart correctly. So you want to make it as tight as possible. And if for some reason when you're done with the battery, you have it in, and you see it's kind of high water, all you got to do is heat one of the joints and then just push the battery in a little bit. Carefully push it in. Heat the joint, then push the battery, and then let the joint go. Let the soldering iron go off the joint, and it will solidify, and you'll have a nice good looking part. And as you can see, it's working. And just to kind of show you one more time, I'm going to power down, power back on, show you that it is in fact working. There you have it. All you gotta do is put it back in this case. We're gonna put a label on it, and that's it. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to also do this Jojo's Venture cart for you, and the reason I'm going to show you this one is because this uses solder tabs on their battery instead of the leads like the last one. Is solder tabs on this battery. What they tended to do when they had the solder tabs, they would put the tabs through the hole, and and then they would bend the tabs outwards a little bit. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to actually have to like desolder it, put the gun on it to heat it up, and then bend the tab up a little bit so I can get it out of the hole. I'm going to have to do it on both sides. Before I do that, I mentioned in the last one that there's 3 holes. Let me show you here. I get the focus for me. Alright, so you got one. This is one of the leads. That's the other lead. That's a 3rd hole right there. You can solder into either one of these holes. And as you see, this one is kind of brashish still. We need to tin that up and get it ready for the battery. So all I'm going to do is take my soldering iron, put you down for 1 second, put a little bit of tin, on my soldering iron here. Alright. And then all I'm going to do, if I can get the focus for you, I'm just going to touch it right here. I want to get that tinned up, but I want to leave that hole in the middle open. And so as you can see, I can fit the lead through there, and then it'll be much easier to solder it to it. Alright, I'm going to set this card up and I'm going to show you me soldering it. Be right back. Alright, got Jojo all set up. As you can hear, it's working. So I'm going to commence with changing the battery. Tip on the tab, and it's going to melt that solder a little slower, but it is melting it. I've got to bend it up a little. Alright, so I got that one. Now I got to do the other side. Alright, so you see I had to bend them up a little bit. Now the battery should slide right out. Actually, I can use this and I can bend that tab a little bit more so it's straight. I'm going to do the same thing over here with my plastic tool. Booyah, battery's out. I noticed there's a lot of solder from, I guess they had this battery replaced at some point by Capcom. That's okay, I'm just going to clean it up a little bit. Alright, looks good. Now I'm going to place the battery, the new battery in. Like I said, remember you're putting plus in plus and negative in negative. Battery is in. Now I just gotta solder it. Heat up the joints. Some solder. Work around that joint there. Actually add a little bit more. Alright. Looks good. Right. More the other side, same thing. This will be much easier because I already tinned the hole. Boom. That's it. Got some nice, strong joints. If you solder it nice and quick, you're going to get those nice, clean, shiny joints. If you don't use enough heat, and you do it too slow, you might get some cold looking joints. They look kind of dull, and like I said, in that case, all you would do is take a little bit of flux like here, which actually isn't necessary for this because I did a good job, but I'm just going to show you again. Nice clean looking joint. Everything right there. So the battery is now changed, good for another 5 to 7 years. And just going to show you it. I'm going to power down. Zoom out. Go ahead and power down. I'm going to power right back up so you can see that it is indeed working again. Comes right up. There you have it. Any questions, send me an email, drop me a note in the comments. Thank you. Okay, I want to add one more quick thing. Whenever I change a battery, I also label them so I know when I change the battery. And you can see here, the front in the front is a cart I just changed for you. The one in the back is the no CD cart I changed several months ago. And here's what I've done. I've marked on the left there on both of them. I say I had a battery change or new battery. The one on the bottom was March 2013. The top one was today's date, October 2nd, 2013. Then you see on the bottom I put Asia no CD version, which means that's a no CD version cart. And then at the top I put it's a USA version, CD required. So I know without booting it up which version I have. So it's just a little more convenient. So, all right, appreciate it.
Sit, Kichi, sit. Good dog.